Way up on the northern part of the island of Sodor, there are mountains. And within those mountains are little engines. These engines work on a railway called the Skarloey Railway. They're much smaller than their standard gauge counterparts, but are just as useful. The day started off like any other. The engines were just waking up to begin work for the day. Good morning, everyone. Isn't it a lovely day? It sure is, Skarloey. Nothing can ruin this day. Ugh, it's another rotten day if you ask me. Of course, maybe except for Duncan. What are you on about this time, Duncan? That new power plant that Sir Topham Hatt built is pretty useless if you ask me. I agree with Duncan. All it's doing is taking up space. Then Rusty pulled in. I don't think having a power plant is that bad, Duncan. Ugh, you're a smelly diesel. What do you know? More than you think, bossy buffers. Don't mind him, Rusty. Duncan's just having a bad day, and so is Sir Handel. What's with all the complaining? Said a voice. It was Duke. He was trying to take a nap, but he couldn't with all that bickering. Can't you see an old engine's trying to get some shut-eye? But before they could answer, they saw Mr. Percival riding his bike. Engines, I just received word from Sir Topham Hatt that the nuclear power plant has exploded. I need all engines to take cover in their sheds immediately. The engines did not hesitate to do so, and they hid in their sheds. Duncan was still cross. Ugh, you're all a bunch of scaredy engines. We live up in the mountains, so even if the power plant exploded, the mountains would protect us from the impact. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Duncan. We look quite open. Unfortunately, Duncan was wrong. The impact hit hard all over the narrow gauge railway. The engines were terrified and didn't dare leave the shed. Don't worry, guys, said Rheneas in a cheerful voice. I'm sure this will pass soon. But as the hours passed, it only got worse. Ugh, to hell with this. I'm getting out of here. No, Duncan, wait. It's not safe. Neither is staying here. I'm out. And Duncan raced off. As Duncan raced along the countryside, he didn't get very far. Ugh, I don't feel too well. But when he tried to blow his whistle, it sounded deformed. Oh no, what's happening to me? But by the time he realized what was going on, it was too late. Meanwhile, the other engines remained in their sheds. Gee, I hope Duncan's all right.
Rusty, if you're so concerned about Duncan, then why don't you go out and look for him? I'm not going out there. You go out there. Okay, I'll go if Peter Sam goes. Don't look at me. I'm not going out there. Guys, that's enough. I'll go out there. No way, youngster. This is a job for a more experienced engine. Youngster? I'm older than you. Yeah, by 5 years. Rheneas, who was just quietly listening to the conversation, was losing his patience. He then blew a loud whistle to get everyone's attention. The other engines stopped to look at Rheneas. I'll go out and look for Duncan. But Rheneas, you're like a brother to me. It's too dangerous. Duncan is our friend, and besides, I know this railway like the back of my buffers. All right, Rheneas, but be careful. And without another word, Rheneas puffed away. I hope Rheneas can find Duncan in time. Rheneas searched high and low for Duncan. He whistled, hoping to hear Duncan, but there was no reply. Then he heard Duncan's whistle, though it sounded a little off. He ventured a little closer, but what he saw next nearly made him jump off the rails. In the distance, he saw what looked like Duncan, except different. Rheneas whistled in terror as he puffed quickly away. When he got back to the sheds, Rheneas told the others what happened. The engines were horrified. And we all have to get out of here right now before the radiation mutates any of us. Are you mad? There's no way I'm leaving my shed. Besides, the sheds are much safer. Well, if we don't get out of here, they won't be for very much longer. Then they all heard a deformed whistle. Duncan's here. Everybody, we need to leave this area now! Well, you didn't have to tell the other engines twice. They raced out of there. All except Sir Handel, who refused to leave his shed. Sir Handel, didn't you hear Rheneas? We need to go now! Well, I'm not leaving my shed. Have fun getting burned! And as if to prove a point, Sir Handel put his brakes on. Come on, Skarloey, we have to leave now! Skarloey was upset that he couldn't save Sir Handel, but he knew Duke was right. When the others left, it wasn't long before Duncan caught up with Sir Handel. The mutated Duncan closed in on Sir Handel, and the little blue engine was done for. Meanwhile, the other engines were trying to escape the railway as fast as they could. They stopped inside of a tunnel to catch their breath. Guys, are we safe in this tunnel? I don't know, Peter Sam. I really don't know. Hours pass, and soon it was nightfall. The little engine still remained in the tunnel and didn't dare move. How much longer do we have to stay in this tunnel? Well, if we stay here any longer, Duncan and Sir Handel will catch up to us. We need to get out of here now. Well, if we make a run for it through the other side of the tunnel, we'll make it out of Sodor by morning. But Duke, that's too risky. The only way we could get to Brendam Docks is if a standard gauge engine takes us there. I agree with Skarloey. Even if there were narrow gauge tracks leading to Brendam Docks, how are we supposed to get there without getting detected by any other mutants? Well, risky or not, it's our only chance of escaping from Sodor. Then it's settled. We need to flag down the nearest standard gauge engine that passes. The engines didn't have to wait long, for they heard a normal whistle. The little engines peeked out of the tunnel to investigate and saw Duck puffing past the tunnel with a few flatbeds. Rheneas let out a whistle to flag Duck down and explained everything. I was just taking Mike, Rex, and Bert over there. Hop in. And the narrow gauge engines were loaded onto the flatbeds by the breakdown train on the back of Duck's train. And when the engines were loaded in, Duck set off. When they got to the docks, Duck proceeded to load the little engines onto the ship that was leaving for the mainland. By then, the sun was rising, signifying a new day. They were just loading the last of the engines in when the breakdown train broke down, with Duke still hanging on. Worse to come, a mutated Gordon spotted them and was racing towards them. Skarloey wanted to go back for Duck and Duke, but was stopped by Rusty. The mutant Gordon caught up with Duck and crashed into him. The impact caused the crane to drop Duke into the water. All the other little engines could do was watch in horror as they lost their friends. By this point, Skarloey was getting angry that he kept failing to save his friends. Rheneas comforted him and told him that this was out of their control. And for the rest of the morning and into the afternoon, the little engines set off for the mainland on the ship. When they got to the mainland, they were unloaded from the ship and were still shaking from the events that took place the night before. I can't believe Grandpuff and Falcon are gone. It's all my fault. I should have went back for them. Don't you dare say that, Skarloey. None of this was any of our faults. Rheneas is right. There is nothing we could have done about last night's events. And with that, the engines continued to explore the mainland. It wasn't long before the engines heard a deformed whistle. A mutated Spencer spotted them and raced towards them. Skarloey, Rheneas, and Peter Sam wasted no time getting out of there. Rusty also tried to move, but he couldn't. Guys, I've run out of fuel. You'll have to go without me. No, Rusty, I'm not about to leave another one of my friends behind. Without wasting any time, Skarloey coupled on to Rusty and pulled him along. The little engines raced at speeds they had never gone before, with the mutated Spencer not far behind. Skarloey, you have to let me go. All I'll do is slow you down. Out of the question, Rusty. I already lost Duncan, Sir Handel, and Duke. I'm not about to lose you too. Rusty decided to take matters into his own buffers and uncoupled from Skarloey. Rusty, what are you doing? I'll keep Spencer busy. You guys get out of here. No, Rusty, don't! But it was too late. The mutated Spencer caught up with Rusty, while the other 3 engines had no choice but to make a run for it. The other 3 engines escaped, but now all that was left was Peter Sam, Rheneas, and Skarloey. Why is this happening to us? Why are we all turning into mutants? It's the radiation from the nuclear plant. Instead of killing us, it's turning us into mutant monsters. While on the mainland, the 3 engines found an abandoned shed and took shelter there. That night, Peter, Sam, and Rheneas were fast asleep. But Skarloey was wide awake. He couldn't stop thinking about Duke, Duncan, Sir Handel, and Rusty. I could have saved them. I could have saved Duke, Sir Handel, Duncan, and Rusty. Why did that radiation have to take them away? The guilt kept him awake all night long. And by the next morning, he was very tired. Rheneas understood this and assured Skarloey that it was in no way his fault. He also told Skarloey to get some more rest while he went to find coal and water. Peter Sam went with Rheneas to make sure that he didn't go out alone. And Skarloey watched as his 2 friends went to find coal and water. 20 minutes later, he heard a frightened whistle. It was Peter Sam rushing towards him. Skarloey, take some coal and get out of here now. Rheneas was just mutated. Well, you didn't have to tell Skarloey twice. He rushed out of the shed and filled up with coal and water. They were just about to leave when Peter Sam felt a horrible pain. All poor Skarloey could do was watch in horror as Peter Sam mutated. Once he filled up with coal and water, Skarloey raced away as fast as he could. He had to get away from the mutants so he wouldn't get mutated himself. When he was out of sight, Skarloey stopped to rest. He was now all alone. He was silent for a moment before saying, I don't know what to do. I literally don't know what to do right now. I've lost everything. My home, my friends, my entire life. For the rest of the day, Skarloey wandered around looking for other engines. Soon it was getting dark, and Skarloey needed to find a place to rest. He managed to find a shed with a water tower and a coal hopper, and he was pretty much set for a little while. I hope this'll all end soon, Skarloey said sadly before falling asleep. But as the days turned into months, it only got worse. 1 year later, Skarloey is still traveling around the railway looking for any surviving engines. But so far, no luck. Skarloey continued searching when he heard a deformed whistle. It was Peter Sam, and he was followed by Rheneas and Rusty. The 3 engines raced towards Skarloey. Terrified, he puffed away as fast as he could. The 3 mutated engines gained up on the poor engine. But Skarloey was determined to escape. Then he was diverted onto a siding. He applied his brakes, but it was too late. Skarloey derailed in a muddy swamp. Well, looks like this is the end, he said sadly as he closed his eyes tightly. Then the most surprising thing happened. The mutants were sprayed with milk and soap. Skarloey still had his eyes closed so he couldn't see what was going on. Then the impact of the milk and soap caused a nearby branch to fall on Skarloey. He was now out cold, and the last thing he saw was an engine puffing towards him. When Skarloey had finally woken up, he found himself on a flatbed. He saw an engine pulling the flatbed and immediately panicked. Whoa, hey, Skarloey, relax, it's just me. Edward, boy am I happy to see you. What happened? You were knocked out cold by a branch. It hit you pretty hard. But the good news is, there's a cure for this mutation. Really? What about my friends? Don't worry, Skarloey, your friends are being rescued. All of them? Well, all except for Duke. We still haven't found him yet. This made Skarloey very sad. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll find Duke soon. He's most likely at the bottom of the ocean at Brendam Docks. Then that's where I'm headed next. And along the way, Edward explained about the cure. When they got to the repair yard, Skarloey was repaired. And soon, All the narrow gauge engines were back to normal. That is, except for one. Hey, where's Duke? Yeah, I haven't seen Grandpuff in a while. I hope Edward arrives soon with the news. Soon Edward arrived, but he was looking sad. Oh boy, what's happened? Maybe they found Duke, but it's gonna take a long time to repair him? Everyone, I have some very sad news. Very sad? Yeah, not looking too good. Did you find him? Oh, we found him all right, but it's gonna take a very long time for him to be back in service. And there's a possibility that he may not be the same engine again. Skarloey was sad for his friend, but was happy that Duke was alive. I'm just glad almost everything's back to normal on Sodor. Unfortunately, the mutation couldn't cure everyone, but that's another story.